I drive my electric bike exclusively on the beach, and I have two levels of after-use maintenance that I go through. Let me show you both of those right now. I do my level 1 maintenance after every trip to the beach because that is the most critical one you're going to end up doing. Level 2 I do after every 5 trips, and that's where I get into chains and things like that. In an earlier video, I showed you how to make one of these covers for the electrical contacts. I put one of those on, and then I run the hose at a moderate intensity and hose everything down to knock off the sand. But then you can't leave it wet. Now you can get chemical sprays that'll dry out the water, but let me show you what I use after I hose it off. And it's called a leaf blower. I'll put this on high speed and I'll knock all the water off to make sure my bike is completely dry. After I blow dry it, I take another look to make sure that all those spots that are prone to rust are completely dry. Anyway, let's shift gears, and now we got to go in the shop and I'll show you what level 2 is. Now it's time for level 2 maintenance. That level 1 basically just knocks off the sand and the grit and protects a little bit against rust. But when you're on the beach, that's salt water. The air is corrosive. So every 5 or so trips, I come in, I put the bike on the handlebar jacks. I'll put a link to them down below if you don't know what they are. But if you don't have jacks, you can just put your handlebars on a couple books and elevate it up. And now I've got my bike where I can work on it. So I want to go ahead and clean it where I can get at everything. And the key thing you have to worry about is the chain, the derailleur, and the rotors for the brakes. So what I've got is I've sucked up and I spent 30 bucks on these muck off protectors for my rotors. They send you 2. You only need 1 at a time, so I gave 1 to one of my buddies. Then I've got this inexpensive apparatus here that I can run the chain through to go ahead and clean it. Of course, a nice brush to get into the cartridge and get all the dirt out. I've got a gentle cleaner. I use this on my grill, so I know it cuts grease and it's fairly gentle. And then I've got a bucket of water that I've already hosed this off, so I'm just going to use that with a light sponge to wipe down the frame and then finish it off with a microfiber cloth. So what kind of lube am I going to use? Well, a beach is kind of a mixed environment. It's wet, but it's dry. I mean, it's a desert. There's sand there. So I know you don't want to use a wet lube because that'll be thick and it'll cause all the sand to stick to my chain. But I recognize that it's not altogether dry either. So that's why I'm going with a mid-grade oil, this rock and roll gold stuff that seems to be highly reviewed. And I'll apply it with one of these applicators right here that I got off Amazon. So let's go ahead and do the first thing, which is clean the chain and the cartridge. But first I need to put this on to protect my brake. You can see I've installed the back part of it. I don't really need this part because I'm not really going to be spraying anything on this side. So this is good enough. All the corrosion and crap will be coming from this side, and this will keep it off my brakes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this to go ahead and scrub everything down, and I will fill this with this nice gentle degrease cleaner, and I'll be ready to go. I'll run this around until my chain looks clean, but I'm not done yet. Now I'll use this tool to make sure that I'm inside every part of the chain and I've gotten all the dirt and grit out of there. You know, when you're doing this rag thing, I find it easy to kind of brace your knuckle against the tire, and that keeps everything from moving around. Now we still need to get these parts of the derailleur and the cartridge. That's where I use this spray, cleaner spray, and I'll get that all in there. Remember, I've got my disc protected, and so this is a great degreaser, and the grease is just going to fall off. But you've still got to get in here and actually get the crud off the teeth. And that's where I like using a small brush. And I'll gently move the chain and push the brush up against the teeth. And I'll do the same thing on the inside. And then this one. Now the last thing left is the cartridge, and that's where you have to use this type of brush to really dig in there to get any sand and grit out. So we don't want to forget this, and it's easy enough to pop the chain off. Use this tool. I find you've got to kind of brace the pedal with your leg to be able to get this all the way around. And see what comes out? Definitely need to do this. Now we're ready to lube the chain. Remember, my rotor is protected, and that's where this applicator comes in. And it's best to lube on the inside, so you don't want to do it up here. You need to do it down here. And so I just squeeze this gently, and that forces the oil out onto the chains. Can't forget about the cartridge, but that's where I've got to use this spray lube to make sure I get everything taken care of. Now you can see why I want to have a drop cloth underneath this. Okay, this is all taken care of. Now it's time for the brakes. I'm not a fan of taking the wheel off to clean the brakes because I'll probably screw up the alignment of the brakes when I put it back on. So I've got this spray cleaner, and again, I've got my protective coat right here. And so I'll spray this down, and then I'm just going to wipe it off with my microfiber cloth. And this will pick up and get rid of any little rust spots that have shown up. And if I don't feel like I'm getting enough on there, I'll put it on the cloth, and I'll do the same thing on the other side just by wedging my hand back there. While your bike is upside down, you need to check a couple other things just to make sure everything's operating smoothly. I just decided that this pedal wasn't spinning smoothly enough, so I took it off and I put some fluid film lube on the inside to make it work right. The other thing, while you've got it up, is spin your wheels to make sure your brakes aren't rubbing. I mean, this is the perfect time to adjust them. Then when all that is done, take a damp sponge and hit any of the underside that's hard to get at in terms of cleaning. Now that the bike is back upright, I want to check my connectors to make sure that they're okay and that they're totally dry. Be careful not to bend anything down here. Before we oil this, we need to make sure all the sand is out here because we don't want the sand getting down in the seal. So I'll take that sponge and I'll run that around. And then I'll run this microfiber cloth around and make sure that's clean. Go ahead and put a little bit of oil on a rag or a paper towel, and be sure you hit the outside of your fork because you don't want this to rust up on you. Yeah, be sure you hit any place where oil could have dripped. And these microfiber towels are just great for cleaning everything up. So that's what I do every 5 or so trips. Probably closer every 10 trips because it's such a lot of work. But I think it'll pay off in the end to protect this valuable investment. Now, if I'm doing anything wrong here, and if you experts out there, please tell me, because I think I've got everything right based on everything I've looked at on the internet to keep this thing running for years. Throw it in the comments. Thanks.